what we are going to talk about, and then we will further on demand the panelists to further contribute on the basis of the presentation, and we go for question and answers, of course. You can ask the questions also in French, for those who are here, because Professor Evelyne Tifo speaks very well French, Sven Walter too, and I think Francesca too. So we have different people who speak French, and they can respond to you. So, can we go and share?
Yes, we will do this in a second. Françoise, let me just from my side also first say that we are all with you in Nantes. We apologize that we could not all, travel. We have people here also from Canada. Evelyn is sitting in Canada. And so this was, of course, all very complicated. But of course, we also now used to this type of, of collaboration. And we have some other colleagues like Thais, who is there from FAO. But just to let you know that we are obviously also with you. And congratulations also to the meeting yesterday. Let me also, before I give the floor, because we give the floor to Evelyn to welcome online, we have a lot of our members of the advisory committee with us who are from all over the world. And just to let you know that the advisory committee is a statutory body of FAO. It's an official one which provides guidance to us, to FAO, on strategic action to promote sustainable forest management from the private sector, because we have some 20 leading private sector experts from the forest product associations, the forest industry associations, and the pulp and paper. And
Sven,
Françoise, yes?
Yeah, ask me if you could speak a little bit slower for the translation.
D'accord, je vais le faire. And so we have, various members here, and I would like also to welcome them, all of them. And Françoise, you will also become soon a member of our advisory committee, and we are very privileged to have you with us, because ATIBT is an important partner for us. And as you know, FAO is always there to support you. And let me just finish by saying that you are right, that you are also co-responsible that we did the study. When we talked about the issue, and we actually asked ourselves the question, how could the sustainable use of wood residues contribute to increase the efficiency of the forest sector? We talked about this in the context of Gabon, but I think we then decided actually to enlarge this and to have a more, broader discussion. And there were colleagues also from the ACSFI who already asked for the report. Heidi, we discussed it also at the World Forestry Congress recently. And so afterwards, we will very soon, soon share the results. But now it's a privilege for us to have Evelyn with us from the University Laval, who actually is the co-author and the main author of the study, together with my colleague Arturo. So I agree, Françoise, let us give the floor to Evelyn and Arturo so they can share with us some of the main conclusions, so that we have some food for thought and for the discussion. And again, thanks, Françoise, for being with us here in Nantes, and thanks to all the colleagues. So Evelyn and Arturo, I think you should start.
Yes, I'm sharing my screen. You hear me well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Everything okay?
Good. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. This is the most hybrid event that I've participated over the past years. To be here and to speak to you there, so that's quite an experience. So I'm a professor at Laval University, and I've been working on topics related to forest biomass for bioenergy for quite some years, but I've been working mostly with forests from the temperate and the boreal biomes. So when I started discussions with the FAO, I was happy for this opportunity to broaden my views of forest bioenergy and wood residues, how it can to learn more and look at opportunities for the rest of the world. So I'm very grateful for this occasion for learning myself. So we'll be presenting results from our study on the wood residues in the transition to sustainable bioenergy. So the context of the study is to see how can modern bioenergy, and more specifically, modern bioenergy from wood residues, can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially the SDG 7 related to energy access. So that the SDG 7 asks for access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So that's an important and big goal. And there's a room there that can be played by wood residues. So what you see on the screen is just a broad statistic about energy access in the world. So we see large variations between world regions, and especially in the case of countries from the African continent. We see that on average they are below than what we see elsewhere in the world. So that's one aspect, the energy access is one important aspect. And also a lot of their energy is from the traditional use of biomass. So to meet the SDG 7 is to increase both the energy access, but also that this energy should come from a modern source of bioenergy. So how can we make this transition? So just again to give a bit of context, when we talk about woody biomass for energy, so this is just some context to explain what we mean by woody biomass. So when we start with the forest land-based and the trees and other wooded land area, so that constitute the forest and wood resources from a given region. So we see that some of these wood resources can be taken for wood fuel. So harvesting and collection of wood fuel for mostly traditional use of biomass. And then you have part of this wood resources that goes through a wood product value chain. So in that context, the wood product value chain, the main goal of such a chain is for material use of wood. But then in the process of making materials from wood, you have the generation of residues. So you have primary residues that come from harvestings on the site. Then you have secondary residues that are generated while we manufacture and process the wood. And then at the end of life of wood products, we have what we call tertiary residues. So they are post-consumer wood products. So those are all sources of residues that come from the wood product value chain. And when you look at that value chain, so you have the material use, but you see the occasion to also have in parallel energy use. So those residues can be collected, maybe recycled to go back into material use, and then end up as energy use. So that's we are basing the hypothesis of the work on that it would be better to have a larger share of wood resources circulating within the wood product value chain, so that it can help mobilize the bioeconomy by creating both material use and energy use. So in our report, we have looked at different aspects and challenges and opportunities for mobilizing wood value chain and residues for energy. So we have looked at social considerations, economic considerations, environmental considerations. So you can look at that once the report is published. So right now we will just focus on a few key messages from our work. So the first key message from our work is that based on understanding of the literature, to mobilize wood residues for bioenergy and help the transition towards bioeconomy, we should encourage systemic changes in land and forest governance to enable the modernization of the wood energy value chain. So that's an overarching message that relates to the land governance and land policy and rights to forest resources and access to forest resource. So it's a bit far from residues themselves, but we thought that this issue needs to be tackled first so that we can then work on the wood product value chain and the mobilization of residues. So when we look at the roundwood production in different regions of the world, so we can see the wood resources as a limited resource, and you can harvest the available roundwood either for direct wood fuel, so to be used directly as a wood fuel, usually for a traditional use of biomass, or it can go in the wood product value chain, so in the industrial roundwood value chain. So when you look at the proportion across different regions of the roundwood that goes either into the wood fuel chain or into the industrial roundwood value chain, so you see large disparities between countries. So to increase the use of, to increase the chances that we can make a transition towards modern bioenergy, we have to find ways in terms of governance and granting access to wood resources and into regulating the use of wood resources so that a larger share of the roundwood production goes towards industrial roundwood value chains. So in this way, we can mobilize wood resource towards the bioeconomy. So that's an overarching message that needs to be tackled before we talk about specifically the wood residues. Second message, we go more in detail into the wood product value chain and the wood residues. What we found in our study is that one way to help mobilize wood residues, it's actually to work on the wood product value chain itself. So we need to find ways to stimulate the efficiency and the added value within the industrial roundwood network. So those are statistics about the use of harvested trees in developing countries. So that we see that, so those are very broad averages, of course, but when we take a tree, we harvest a tree within the industrial roundwood network, there are a lot of residues that are generated. They are either left on the site or they are generated during wood processing and manufacturing. And actually, there's only quite a small share of the original tree that actually end up as a material product. So it varies between 15 to 25%. That fact that just a small share of the wood actually end up as material product, it makes the profitability of the whole chain a bit difficult. And when the material yield of the wood product chain is not very high, it doesn't give a lot of incentive to mobilize the residues. So when we look at examples from other countries, we see that countries that have successful value chains for their residues, they put also a lot of value on the material use of wood. Because when you create a high value material wood product, it gives you the financial means to mobilize the residues, to manage your residues in a more efficient way. So it makes it easier to then use them for energy. So the financial profitability of energy use from wood residues largely depend on the viability of the material products. So if you give some thought and love to the material use, then it will help mobilize the residues. So it may seem a bit counterintuitive, but if you you have a larger share of material from your tree, it will increase your whole financial viability, and it will help you. It may decrease the raw availability of residues, but it will give you more financial means to mobilize those residues. It's the same with our third message. On the same way, to help mobilize residues, you need to stimulate the cascading use of wood resources. So when we look at the industrial wood value chain, so we saw there are points where you have the generation of wood residues. Those residues, they can be recycled back in material use. So this is what we call material use. So for example, when you do the wood processing, you generate secondary residues. They can be recovered and further used for panel, for example. So when you do that, you increase the value within your chain, and then it gives you, again, financial means to develop ways for energy use at the end of life of your product. So stimulating cascading use, it means that your residues, they will cycle back for material use, and then at their end of life, they can then be used for energy. So again, it creates more value for the chain and more opportunities for energy. Those are just examples of how cascading use can be deployed. So you have occasions for different kinds of residues to be used as feedstock for the production of material products. And then at the end of life of those products, they can then be used for energy. So those were just 3 of the key messages of our report. We have several more. They are shown here with the different categories of stakeholders that we hope can take into their hands those recommendations and implement them. So we start with overarching recommendations related to land use and access to the resource, and we go to a more detailed recommendations related to the industrial wood chain itself and the use of residues. For example, once you have solved land issues, then you can start working on cooperative solutions to mobilize communities around wood energy value chains. So we have examples from other countries where cooperatives are a good way to mobilize communities around such a project. And then there are ways when you have that, it makes it easier to provide and generate better data and reporting and governing and monitoring of your wood value chain. So you have a better idea of your wood residue potentials. Then again, putting effort into having efficient wood product value chain for material use will have benefit for the energy use of residues. And then that can go into developing a better classification and standardization for wood residues. I will now give the floor to Arturo for the last words.
Thanks a lot, Evelyn. Yes, I would like to summarize our final considerations here, in which can also stimulate the discussion in the Q&A session. So I think it's important to highlight, that has been also mentioned by Evelyn, that in order to have access to sustainable energy for all, a transition from traditional use of woody biomass for energy is necessary, and modern energy systems can contribute to that. Then I would like also to highlight that in several developing countries, wood residues generated by industrial round wood production are often considered waste to be eliminated through open-air combustions or simply abandoned. So this is a situation still quite, it's often to find this kind of situation. However, the use of wood residues can play a significant role in achieving sustainable energy for different purposes, such as cooking, heating, and power generation. So the combination of sustainable forest management with the efficient use of harvested roundwood is a way to, of harvested and processing roundwood is a way to develop a modern bioenergy value chain. This is part of a larger sustainable bioeconomy, which include, for example, the substitution of non-renewable materials and energy. And then finally, we also believe that it's very important to understand the site specificity locally, to understand the potential deployment of wood residues for energy. It is important to avoid, for instance, the one size fits all approach. So this is something that we should be trying to avoid as much as possible, because the bioenergy in general, but in this case, food residues, it's always very, so the use and the production of wood residues is very site specific. And so specifically in developing countries, there is often a need to collect site-specific evidence on wood residues availability and to analyze appropriate technologies in order to inform investors, support the development of policies, and ensure best practices are implemented. That's all from me. Now I would like to give back the floor to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you both for this. Well, a lot of information is coming towards us, and I'm sure there will going to be questions here in the room. But I do have one question. I know I'm the moderator, but I think I should be allowed to at least pose one question. Do you think that wood energy will really contribute to climate change mitigation?
That's a good question. I have a slide on that I hadn't had time to show. I will get to that. Just one second. I would defer the question to another scientific body, so the International Panel on Climate Change. They have, when you look at their reporting on actions for mitigation of climate change, the IPCC recognizes the central role of bioenergy for the energy transition and for meeting climate change mitigation goals. So in their last report that was published just a few weeks ago, you see the different mitigation actions that are discussed in the report. And you see there are several of them, I have highlighted them, that relates to energy from biomass. So that includes not only wood biomass, but also other form of biomass. But clearly, in some regions, it's the wood biomass that can play an important role. And the IPCC also recognizes the role of sustainable forest management as a whole for climate change mitigation. And part of that includes energy. So the quick answer is yes, bioenergy can contribute to climate change mitigation, and you don't have to believe our word. It's the word of the IPCC. They clearly see a pathway in which bioenergy from woody biomass plays an important role for climate change mitigation goals.
Thank you, Evelyn. I see there are questions on the chat. I will try to see. No, that's colleagues. We already did that. I think it's the messages of Sven to see, is there somebody in the waiting room? That's okay. Okay, please feel free to raise your hand in case of questions or use the chat. That's a message for Sven, I suppose, to the participants who are online. So we can see the screen. If you have a question, of course, do so. In the meantime, I will ask here if somebody has questions for you. Quelqu'un a une question à poser?
Bonsoir, donc Julie Landry. Moi, je travaille dans la cosmétique. Donc, tout à l'heure, on est en train de parler des résidus des bois. Il faut savoir qu'aujourd'hui, on est dans l'alternative avec les plastiques. Aujourd'hui, les fabricants des cosmétiques sont en train de réfléchir sur les copeaux de bois, parce qu'on a l'exemple d'une société en Finlande qui fait aujourd'hui des pots biodégradables. Donc, je pense qu'on peut réfléchir sur cet angle-là, parce que dans quelques années, le plastique va disparaître. Est-ce qu'on ne peut pas, avec tous les forestiers, tous les résidus qui existent, de réfléchir sur cette alternative pour éventuellement réduire tous les déchets qui sont faits autour du plastique?
Oui, je vais répondre en français.
Can you also, sorry, Evelyn, can you also summarize it in English for the others? Because the colleagues here couldn't maybe understand it.
Yeah, the comment was about the fact that it's now possible to also use wood residues to make bioproducts, bioplastics, for example, and that could be an important pathway for wood residues. If it can, so there are already processes that exist with which you can make bioplastics to replace fossil-based plastic. Donc, c'est vraiment un point important, et je crois que ça vient dans l'idée qu'il faut trouver des moyens d'augmenter l'utilisation matérielle de la ressource bois, et ça inclut les bioplastiques. Il ne faut pas voir ça comme une utilisation compétitrice à l'utilisation énergie. Ça fait partie de la même histoire. Si on développe des applications permettant de faire des bioplastiques ou autres bioproduits à partir des résidus, ça fait augmenter la valeur de la ressource forestière, ça fait augmenter la valeur de la chaîne de production, et ça donne des moyens de développer aussi des utilisations énergétiques de la ressource forestière. Donc, c'est un excellent point. Si on peut développer des bioplastiques, en fin de vie, ces bioplastiques-là, ils peuvent être recyclés en énergie. Donc, on devrait encourager effectivement ce genre d'application-là. I will say it in English now, Sven, yes?
Short, because also Derek has a question, Evelyn.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So I was saying that encouraging material use of wood residues, such as developing bioproducts, bioplastics, is an excellent idea, because it will add value to the forest resource, add value to the roundwood production chain, and it will give you means for also developing energy use. So we should not see such products, for example, bioplastics, as a threat for energy production, because it will help give value, and it will help give means for developing also energy use. For example, the bioplastics can be recovered at their end of life for energy use. So if you encourage bioplastics, then at the end it will also help energy use. So that's what we see in some countries. For example, in Norway, they have shown that they are very efficient at using their wood residues for material use, for recovering for material use, and that creates then opportunities also for energy. So there is a really synergetic aspect of that.
Thank you, Evelyn. Derek, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Evelyn, I was interested in your comment on systemic changes around governance, and I know that can vary from, you know, a more developed country to a more developing country. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking of it in the Canadian context, where we have provincial regulation and most forestry is on public land, but maybe in the Canadian context and more broadly, any examples you can point to in terms of what systemic change means?
It's really the regulating of the access to the resources. So when there is no clear regulation, we have examples that it devalue the use of wood. So when you have proper regulations, then it increases the value of the wood, and then you will be more careful and less wasteful in the way you will use the wood. It's hard to say how much can we just export models from for example, from Canada to other countries. For example, in Quebec, the government has a quite precise inventory of the wood resources, and it grants specific permits to companies. But the companies have to be based in Quebec and owned locally. So that might be something to see how we can grant access to local enterprises and local communities. So example from developing countries show that they are you can have success when you give local communities proper access to their own resources and trust them into developing their value chain. But there has to be some regulation and monitoring of the use if you want to reduce the waste and increase efficiency, and that has it refers to the forest, the wood resources itself. But if you don't have that, then you won't have efficient use of the wood residue. So if you don't solve that problem, it would be really hard to have a successful mobilization of wood residues.
Thank you.
I've asked around. I have still one more question. I don't know whether that has been taken into consideration in the report. There is this free economical continental zone that will be installed for Africa. And one of the problems, for instance, with wood residues or pellets or briquettes or charcoal used to be also the custom duties to be paid. But if this is a free economical zone, that might, of course, have an influence on more charcoal or wood residues going left and right on the continent. Do you think that will have an impact also on the use? Is that something you... I know it's not for tomorrow, but there's a lot going on that, and countries are pushing. So we might one day just wake up and say, okay, charcoal, wood residues, it can go left, right.
But I see that it could either help or have a negative effect. It depends. Maybe it can help generate data. So that's one aspect. The lack of proper data about the generation of wood residues, their availability, the trade right now and the production is very around wood fuel, for example, it's very informal. So maybe there is a chance that if there is more trade, maybe it can come with a better tracking system and generating more data. But it can also go the other way, that if there is more trade, then it will just mean that we will lose track of everything. So I don't have a clear answer on that, but I can see that it could somehow be beneficial if it helps generating data, because more data means we will be more able to develop more specific policies to help the mobilization for energy. Maybe Arturo has an answer for that.
I wanted to complement with, as you mentioned, Francois, about African issues, which is in a situation where, of course, we need to keep into account that the large share of wood fuel relative to the overall round wood production, particularly in Africa, and the concomitant, basically, small share of forest resources that transit through industrial round wood value chains, it's representing issues. So basically, what also we have highlighted in the report that this, in some circumstances, in particular in some developing countries, and in particular in several of the sub-regional part of Africa, there is a need to basically first to create added value in the wood and the forest product value chain, and in order then to have a larger structural transitions towards the evaluation of forest resources. So this is just to say that in some cases the wood residues could represent a minimum impact to replace the current use of traditional biomass in some of the African countries. Yeah. Over.
Okay, Arturo, we don't hear you anymore. I hope you went to the end of it. I think the wrap-up was Derek's task, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, listen, I wanted to thank those who led organizing this, and Evelyn and Arturo for the discussion. This is a really important discussion in the context of net zero and climate action, and it is an area, I think, of the value chain where there's still a lot of debate going on. So I think this is really timely. I wanted to share maybe, I think what was said today speaks for itself, but there's a couple of other side benefits, I think, of this conversation that I know from a Canadian perspective, we're really keenly live to, especially, as our climate becomes warmer, as we experience more drought, as we experience worse pest infestations in our forests, and we're challenged with forest health and resilience, and seeing much more catastrophic wildfires burning, I know in Canada and the United States and other parts of, the bushfires in Australia of a few years ago. We're seeing this all over the world, and one of the other benefits that we're talking about in terms of maximizing residuals and getting this circular economy going is the alternative, which is wood waste, for lack of a better term, piling up in our communities and serving as a risk of wildfires. So establishing these new markets and establishing this emerging forest bioeconomy that's before us. Of course, there's this important technical scientific conversation that needs to be had about how do we optimize, maximize. There's of course the economic impact. I know for more traditional industries, having markets to sell their residuals to is pretty important to keep those businesses profitable. So that's a benefit. So you got the how it strengthens the overall industry and the more primary components of the industry, providing good paying, family supporting jobs in communities that need them, which, in a lot of countries tend to be more rural, northern, remote type countries, and then also the avoidance of wildfire risk from the alternative of having these residuals piling up in our communities. And I know in the Canadian context, the community that's most disproportionately impacted by wildfires and related evacuations are Indigenous peoples. So there's a lot of other benefits here, I think, today, and I thought Evelyn and Arturo really captured a lot of the, I think this serves a great platform for a lot of us to build our forest bioeconomy plans in our respective countries, and gives us a lot to think about. But I also wanted to take the opportunity maybe to talk about some of the side benefits in terms of the economic and job piece, and then also the avoidance and in terms of managing forest health issues, and maybe I'll finish that point by saying that I know a lot of countries, there is a very, very active conservation or land protection agenda, and I think most of us in forestry, we're inherent conservationists in terms of how we do our business. But I would also say that our national parks in Canada are now a carbon source. So protection is not always the answer. So we need to be thoughtful about how we're managing our resources, and forest management and building this forest bioeconomy is going to deliver a lot of benefits. So I thank Evelyn and Arturo for being here for this work. Special shout out to Evelyn, a fellow Canadian, of course, but a real pleasure to listen in today. Thank you very much.
Well, I think we're at the end. Sven, do you still have something to say? Or are you okay with the wrap-up that Derek did?
Well, that's why we asked Derek to do it, because we know that he's perfect in this. Thanks a lot, Derek. And yes, I mean, we are really interested to work and to continue working with all of you on this topic to increase actually the bioeconomy and to help countries to transit towards a bioeconomy, and we cannot do it without the forest sector. So let us position ourselves as foresters and forest sector well to help countries, and like this I think we also help countries to achieve our climate change targets. So thanks a lot, Françoise. I wish you all the best for Nantes. Have a very good continuation with all the colleagues there, and we promise that the next time we will be around, and then we do this all in place in Nantes or wherever the next one will take place. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sven. And thanks all of you for sharing. And I'm awaiting the report, Evelyn. So get it through. Thank you. Thank you all, and bye-bye.
Can I just make one? Can I just make one comment,
yeah, of
please?
course, of course.
I'm an observer from Australia, and Evelyn, thank you so much for your input. It's very much appreciated. I'm from Altus Renewables. You know, I think Australia, we're probably 10 years behind Europe and North America, whether it's Canada or the US. But it's very important for Australia, particularly in the Asia Pacific region. And, you know, we've got a small pellet plant that we commenced, 8 years ago. The government here thought we were nuts. It's been a difficult play. We're about to embark on a much larger project, but it's really pleasing to hear so much of the input from this evening. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to our part of the world, the Southern Hemisphere, catching up with what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere, and we're looking forward to seeing a lot of progress on that front in the coming years. So thanks very much for your input. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye to all of you. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
All the best. Cheers. Bye.